Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Astro Show, a place to be if you're curious about the universe. I'm your host, Dr. Sam, the founder and executive director of Wyoming Stargazing. Here you can pick the brains of astrophysicists, get some advice from an aerospace doctor, learn what astronomers have to say about life, and find out about what's going on up above your head, all in the same place. So we hope that you join us on the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month, 6 p.m. Mountain Time on YouTube, Twitch, and now on Facebook. Don't forget that you can chat your questions on Twitch and YouTube, or you can call in to the Zoom meeting and you can ask your questions or make your comments live. We would love to hear from you, so give us a ring. In this week's show, we are going to chat with Dr. Aaron Bell. Among other things, Dr. Bell researches astrobiology, and he's a machine learning software engineer. And he'll be here to tell us all about those things later on. But before Dr. Bell joins us, let's welcome our co-stars. First, doctoral candidate in astrophysics from the University of Chicago and host of her own YouTube show, Nora's Guide to the Galaxy, it's Dr. Nora Bailey.
Not a candidate anymore, but
oh
thanks,
no, I said doctoral graduate.
No, you didn't.
I said candidate. That's funny. You know,
it's okay.
Right
that sounds better than saying completely unemployed, but
oh, that's funny. No, it's funny, Nora, because right in front of me here on the screen, I have doctoral graduate, but I was trying to recite it from memory. I didn't look at the screen. And I said candidate so many times. So that's what happened there. My apologies. Doctoral graduate in astrophysics from the University of Chicago. It's Dr. Nora Bailey.
Hi.
There we go. That's much better. Sorry, Nora. All right. Next, Director of Education and Public Outreach from the Vera Rubin Observatory. It's Dr. Lauren Corleys.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Lauren.
Hello.
At least I got your directorship correct. And last, but certainly not least, clinical supervisor for student teachers at Western Governors University, it's Dr. Michelle Valdez.
Hello.
Hey, Michelle, thanks for being here.
Hello. Yep.
And unfortunately, Dr. Danny can't make it this week. She is on call at her hospital, and she's actually on call for doing transplants tonight. And she just texted me and told me they're getting slammed. So somebody's getting a new liver or pancreas or something like that. And Danny's making that happen. So thank you, Dr. Danny, for saving lives. Sorry you can't make it tonight. All right. So let's get on with Astro Advice. Life advice from astronomers, astronauts, and other scientists. Here is our quotation for this evening. Do not undertake a scientific career in quest of fame or money. No kidding. There are easier and better ways to reach them. Undertake it only if nothing else will satisfy you, for nothing else is probably what you will receive. Your reward will be in the widening of the horizon as you climb. And if you achieve that reward, you will ask no other. So, 4 options for who actually said that. Dr. Fred Hoyle, Dr. Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin, Dr. George Gamow, and Annie Jump Cannon. Of course, Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin and Annie Jump Cannon are 2 of the most famous computers of their time, not allowed to be professional astronomers because they were women, but nonetheless made incredible contributions to the field of astronomy. George Gamow, I looked him up, but now I can't remember. He, cannot remember. And Fred Hoyle was responsible for, I'm drawing a blank on Fred as well.
Is that kind of day. Huh?
I'm not going to pick those two.
We're going to have to come back to that. They both did really cool things in astronomy, but that's all I got right now. It's been a long
Gamma,
day.
I want to say, I feel like was something to do with elements and stars, like the carbon, like tunneling. I could be totally wrong there.
All right,
It's been
here
a
we
while.
go. George Gamow. Oh no, so George Gamow, he was an early developer of Lemaitre's Big Bang theory. So this was a precursor to Hubble and Einstein before there were actual data supporting the Big Bang theory. When Lemaitre actually came up with that, Lemaitre, by the way, was a Catholic priest, but apparently George Gamow believed him and was helping to develop that theory before Hubble produced his miraculous data. So that's George Gamow. Fred.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm going to take one of the women. I just don't know which one.
Yeah, so Fred formulated some of the early theories of nucleosynthesis. That was what Fred did, among other things. He actually had his hands in a lot of different stuff. He was an amazing astronomer, but that was one of his big contributions. All right, so you've got your 4 options. What say you, co-stars?
Maybe just go Cecilia, maybe?
Okay, so we got 1 vote for Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin. For Michelle.
I think I'm going to pick George Gamow.
George Gamow for Lauren.
Probably right. I don't know.
Nora.
It is a guess.
Okay, sorry, I got distracted Googling, but I was actually right. George Gamow is related to the quantum tunneling effect for carbon production and stellar nucleosynthesis. Aha!
Oh,
Very
okay.
nice.
Okay.
Very nice. I love it.
I don't know why I don't know why that stuck with me, but it,
No, that's great.
I guess I'll go with him just because now I feel a kinship.
Okay, so two votes for George Gamow, 1 vote for Cecilia Payne, and it was Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin.
Look at you. Good points. Yay.
Yeah.
I did it again.
And yeah,
I always
so
get stressed out about this
Michelle's gonna pull off another win,
I
maybe.
just guessed.
So her story is kind of tragic, actually. So she wrote an absolutely groundbreaking PhD dissertation in which she postulated the composition of the sun being primarily made up of hydrogen. And at the time, her advisor was of the persuasion, as were the rest of the astronomers in the astronomical community, that the sun had the same composition as the Earth. It was just hotter. And so he convinced her not to publish that dissertation because it was so counter to the theory of the day. And later, he published that theory and did make note that she had come up with a similar idea earlier, but she never got credit for being the first person to ever understand the composition of stars. But that was Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin. So happy to honor her this evening.
And what year was that?
That was 1920s, I believe. Let's see when she actually published it. She published her dissertation in 1925. Yeah. Yep. And yeah, unfortunately, her professor either deliberately or indeliberately, was either trying to take credit or really didn't believe it was going to go anywhere. But yeah, later he took credit, and that was Henry Norris Russell, who has his name on the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram. It should really be the Payne-Gaposchkin diagram. Anyways, enough of that. On to Astro 365. This day in astrophysics history. So in 1965, on this day, the first commercial telescope conversation, telephone conversation rather, via satellite took place between America and Europe. Satellite was called Early Bird 1. And what really struck me about that is that 1965 was less than 60 years ago. The very first time we ever had a satellite phone call. And now, how many billions of people make satellite phone calls multiple times a day? And pretty soon, most internet is going to be satellite based. So I think we've come quite a long way in under 60 years. But I neglected to ask y'all what you thought about Cecilia Payne's comment before I moved on to that. So before we go into the quiz, I'll have to take us back to that and see if the co-stars have any thoughts about what Cecilia Payne has to say.
I would just like to say this because when I started my teaching career, I think it was like 1991 when I first became a teacher, everyone would say to me, like, you're not going to make very much money. And we didn't make very much money at all. But my love for teaching students and learning from my students was so more rewarding than finding a career that would pay me more than an educator at that time. So that quote really hit me there and brought me back to that time.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah, I also didn't have any ideas of grandeur being an educator.
Yeah.
No, I think for me, it depends on like how you want to define a scientific career. I think based off the rest of this quote, it seems she means this sort of traditional, I will be an academic researcher at a university kind of a role. But I think it's worth acknowledging that there are lots of different ways to have scientific careers, and that's maybe the most satisfying way for some people, but not for everyone. And for me, I think the way that I've tried to like navigate my career is less, what is this long-term 30-year plan of what's going to make me happy? And just in the moment, like, is this a good decision for me right now? So getting my PhD was a great decision for me in that moment. Maybe I'm not doing academic research right now, but I'm still glad that I had that experience and sort of navigating myself that way, as opposed to thinking of it as this monolithic, my career that I'm working towards.
Yeah, as someone who really doesn't use anything in their PhD on a day-to-day basis, I completely agree with you, Lauren.
Yeah. So, but that was still a satisfying experience for me, right? So
indeed.
Yeah.
Likewise.
And like that was the reward. So
yeah.
I think, yeah, I totally agree that scientific research is its own reward, and like learning about the universe is, like rewarding in and of itself. But I also think that this sentiment is like, can be used really negatively against people. Like, how dare you want to get paid a living wage, or how dare you not want to work 100 hours a week while doing your PhD, because like you should be so in love with this that you don't need to like, do other things. And so I think there's like kind of a negative flip side to that kind of sentiment, but like I do agree with it in general. I just think like just because you love something and it is its own reward doesn't mean that you should be exploited. Flip side to that kind of
yeah, agreed. Anybody else have any comments on this one?
I do believe you guys are saying that PhD when you get that, very rewarding, and it's kind of a personal journey. And I applaud you, Nora, for just getting out there, and you're just right there. You're going to grab it any second. Awesome.
All right. Well, let's keep moving forward to our news quiz show section for today. So we are going to start with, who do we have up first today? We've got Nora. All right, Nora. So we got your first question up here. Which light spacecraft just sent a selfie down to Earth, which will likely be its last, because it will unfortunately burn up in the atmosphere in the next few months?
Okay, sorry, I just froze for a minute, but
Oh, you're good.
I can see the question.
Yeah.
Which light spacecraft just sent a selfie down Earth?
Yeah. And if you need a hint, I can give you a hint.
Yeah, I need a hint on this one.
So the hint is the word light.
Oh, the way it's spelled. Yeah, that still doesn't help. I don't know this one. I don't know. Sorry.
It is Light Sail 2.
Oh, I didn't know it was due to burn up so soon. Oh,
I know, it's
that's
really sad. Yeah, it wasn't due to burn up so soon.
Okay.
Unfortunately, there's been some atmospheric drag, and it's coming down earlier than expected.
Well,
Yeah,
that's too bad. I am a Planetary
bad.
Society member, so I have been involved in like.
Yeah, it's very cool.
I
I didn't know that the Planetary Society actually did these kinds of missions, so I was super cool to learn that. And I mean, it's definitely done well. I mean, a lot of really good data have come from it, so a good learning exercise. But unfortunately, not everything has gone quite according to plan.
Does that mean that they've learned something new about the atmosphere at that altitude? Like, is it denser than they thought, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's basically the gist of it. I didn't go
cool.
I didn't go into the details, but yeah, way more atmospheric drag than they were thinking.
I think that's one of my favorite things about astronomy is even when things go poorly or you get a null result, you're still learning something that you didn't know before. So that's really neat. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's very cool. All right. You got 2 more chances, Nora. Here you go.
Okay. All right.
Next question. Which European orbiter just got, I shouldn't say European. That's funny. not European.
Definitely read it as Europa first
So
too.
that
And then I had to
not European, but your European orbiter just got an upgrade to be able to. Actually, no. I'm just joking. It is European.
Oh, it's both European and European?
No. I was just messing with you there. Which European orbiter just got an upgrade to be able to find water on its host planet? I was trying to throw you off there. It doesn't have anything to do with Jupiter or Europa.
Okay.
But it was an orbiter made by the European Space Agency.
Yeah.
Trying to find water.
But it got an upgrade to be able to find water on its host planet.
Yeah, some software upgrades, not any hardware, because it is in orbit around a host planet.
Yeah.
But it did get some software upgrades that are enabling it to search for water more effectively.
I mean, that makes me think Mars, but
you got half the question right there.
what's the name of it? I know the NASA, the Mars Reconnaissance.
It's not NASA. It's not NASA.
It's not a NASA one.
No.
I know the Chinese one, and
Not the
United
Chinese.
Arab Emirates one, but
Is that a Chinese one? Okay, so let's see if we can help you get this. Not slow, but quickly. Fast.
Quickly.
Yeah, not fast food, but think a bit like when you're going to get like an oil lube and filter. It's not fast lube. It's what's that? Express.
Oh, Mars Express.
Express lube, not Mars Jiffy, but Mars.
I was gonna say I think I would remember an orbiter named Jiffy.
Mars Express.
Okay,
Sorry,
sorry.
we only give you half a point for that one.
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay, so yeah, that
There's
was
so many Mars orbiters.
yeah, that's the Mars Express right there. Yeah, there we go.
Well, very cool.
All right, last question, Nora. Bepi Colombo mission flew just 125 miles above the surface of this solar system object last
I
week.
believe it just did another Mercury flyby.
It did a Mercury flyby 125 miles above the Mercurian surface. Is that how you say that?
I think so.
Pretty incredible shot, right? I mean, that looks
Yeah.
like the moon, but that is indeed Mercury, and a bit of a selfie there from Bepi Colombo.
That's cool.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty sweet. All right, Nora, you got 1.5 questions right there, so that does put you in the lead with 1.5 correct
I
questions.
like that you get a half point. That's awesome.
Definitely get a half point.
I'll take everything I can get.
All right, so we've got Lauren up next, but Lauren, you have a special option because Danny isn't here, and I had one really fun pop question, like pop science question for Danny. So I can give that one to you if you want, or I can stick with the more galaxy-esque questions that I put together for you. Or we could do
a fun one.
Fun one? Okay, here you go.
Nothing to lose by being wrong. Let's learn something
I
fun.
really did mean pop, because what soda company just announced its limited version edition vinyl astronaut figures featuring the current NASA spacesuit and the new Orion pressure suit? What soda company just did that?
I want to guess Coca-Cola.
It's not Coca-Cola. It's one I had never heard of.
Oh.
But apparently they are all the rage now. And it turns out that even though they're a quote unquote soda company, they don't actually sell soda. They are called Funko Soda. And what
like
Funko
Pop.
Pop. Yeah. So you get this little, it looks just like a soda can, but instead of there being a carbonated beverage, you get a little figurine. So they just signed a contract with NASA, and they are doing a NASA astronaut in the new Funko soda cans. So look for those.
That's super cool. I love that.
Yeah, both the like classic white spacesuit and the new Orion pressure suit. So, all right, well, we'll get back to some radio astronomy questions for you. I thought some of these were pretty cool, actually. Okay, so here's an anomalous one. What recent signal was determined to be 30 billion light years away from Earth? That should raise some eyebrows. Putting doubts into the assumptions about measuring distances using dispersion values from these types of signals. And I'll bring us...
that was a long question. Can I see that one?
Yeah,
I need to break it down a little bit.
What recent signal was determined to be 30 billion light years away from Earth, putting doubts into assumptions about measuring distances from dispersion values from these types of signals? And I gave you a little hint there when I told you what type of astronomy we were looking into there.
I'm trying to remember what we measure dispersion values to. I should know this. I've been to talks about it, but it's been a minute, and so it's just left my brain. But I know I knew this.
And these are like relatively new discoveries. We don't actually know what these things are.
Are they blazars?
You are on the right track.
My brain also went to maser. We like to call things.
Yeah. So I remember I mentioned we were doing some. It was like a radio astronomy question.
I don't know. I could keep guessing random objects. Okay. Which could be fun, but
these are the fast radio bursts.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Fast radio bursts. So yeah, apparently there's this new anomalous fast radio burst that has a dispersion value that puts it out at 30 billion light years, which is twice the size as the visible universe. So probably not accurate. This one is also really strange because it has a periodic cycle, unlike any other fast radio burst. It repeats every 12 months or something like that. So this is FRB 190520, if you were interested.
Catchy.
Yeah, right. Real catchy. You remember
Yeah.
that one in a pinch, right?
Sure.
All right. So, but yeah, very. That's the signature of it there.
Okay.
Yeah, every 12 months or so, this weird little fast radio burst.
Neat.
But it's not 30 billion light years away, so something is wrong in those the way we're calculating those distances. All right, here is your next question, Lauren, and your third question. New images of our closest galactic neighbors using data from retired telescopes reveal what? Filling the space between all the stars in those galaxies.
Is it different kinds of gas and dust?
You got it.
Yeah.
Nicely
Hey.
done. Yeah, it turns out that astronomers were right. There is a whole lot of dust out there between all the stars, feeding star formation. Lots and lots of dust.
Or dust is
All right.
mostly just like a complex molecule, something that's not an atom. So
That's
we'll
right.
call it
Yeah.
dust.
Yes, this is not like the dust that you have to sweep up in your house. As Lauren put it, yeah, these are basically not singular atoms, but little tiny bits of stuffs between all of the stars, but huge quantities of it, enough to make new stars, which is pretty amazing when you think about that. As
Next slide, the image, hopefully.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of dust out there.
Cool.
There's this lovely picture of Andromeda in infrared, showing the accumulation of dust throughout the galaxy, which is pretty sweet. All right, well, you got one, Lauren. So that puts you tied for second place right now. Nora is still in the lead with 1.5 points. And Michelle, you are up now. You ready for this?
All right.
All right.
I'm ready.
We're going to skip this question. That one was an extra one.
Jupiter.
No, that was not Jupiter.
Okay, here we go.
Good guess, though. Okay. Which renowned observatory was threatened by Arizona wildfires last week?
The Arizona Observatory.
That would be even too easy even for this show. Do you know any Arizona observatories?
I do not. Is it named after a town?
It is not.
No, they know. I don't know it.
Okay, this is Kitt Peak. I actually got to do a little observing there back in the day when I was an undergrad.
Wow.
And many of the telescopes narrowly escaped the fires last week, but only minor damage to the outsides of a couple of buildings.
I just don't know the name of it. What's the observatory name?
Kitt Peak.
Okay. Yeah.
Kitt Peak. Yep. All right. Here's another fun one. A recently published report from the International Dark Sky Association, compiling results from over 300 peer-reviewed papers, suggests that people 30 years and younger may never have experienced what?
Looking at the night sky.
Well, they could have looked up, but there was something in particular that young folks may never have experienced when they look up at the night sky.
Looking at constellations or stars.
You're on the right track. You're on the right track. I feel like we can give you a half a point for the first couple of guesses there. The answer is a truly dark night sky.
Milky Way?
Not specifically the Milky Way. Yeah, not specifically the Milky Way, but just a truly dark sky.
Oh, okay. Well, dark sky said, okay, that was, yeah.
But yeah, we'll give you a half a point for that. So that gives you 1.5 points. So we have a tie for first place. So this last question is the tiebreaker. Are you ready? And I am serious about this. No cockroaches were harmed in the pending auction of cockroach digested dust from what solar system body?
The Milky Way. No.
Which no cockroaches were harmed in this pending auction of cockroach digested dust from which solar system body?
Mars.
Good
Milky
guess.
Way.
It's the moon. And here are the said cockroaches and the moon dust that they were asked to digest back in 1969. When the first astronauts to walk on the moon returned. And they were kept in quarantine because they were covered head to toe in moon dust. And it wasn't known whether or not moon dust was toxic. So moon dust was fed to these 3 cockroaches, and the cockroaches were just fine. They ate the moon dust and they just kept walking around. And apparently that was good enough for NASA. Then the astronauts were released from quarantine. Apparently what happened was that the researcher in charge of that experiment somehow got the moon dust and the cockroaches out of the facilities. I guess in Cape Canaveral is where they landed. And they appeared at a private auction just a couple weeks ago. NASA found out about it and put the kibosh on the auction and retrieved their esteemed cockroaches and moon dust. But these cockroaches were long dead from old age. They did not suffer any deleterious effects from the moon dust.
Wow.
So we have a 2-way tie. This is the first time ever we have a 2-way tie with 1.5 points with both Nora and Michelle. So congratulations. You are both our weekly champions. Nicely done. All right. It is time for What's Up, Dr. Sam. And if you haven't seen the 5-planet lineup up in the sky yet, you are missing out. The best time to see it was last Friday. You could see 5 planets lined up from closest to the sun to farthest away. The moon was actually standing in for the Earth on Friday night, right between Venus and Mars, just before sunrise. I did not see this myself, by the way, because it was cloudy here every morning. Not cloudy, but actually fog out in the San Francisco
Also,
Bay
do you
Area.
know how early sunrise is?
Yeah, well, this is like a half an hour before sunrise, and yeah, not typically my cup of tea. I do late night astronomy as opposed to early morning astronomy, but maybe those solar astronomers were up that early to see this, but I did not. I've heard from a bunch of people it was really amazing though, and you still have a few days to see it if you haven't seen it. Basically, all you got to do is look east at about 4:30, 4:45. And depending on where you are, obviously, about half an hour before.
Samuel, are those lined up like the distance from the sun?
They are, yeah. Sun or Earth, yeah, same diff, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and this isn't going to happen again until 2040. So another 18 years. But check it out. You got a few more days to see it before Mercury gets close enough to the sun to where it won't be visible anymore. So definitely get out there and check it out if you haven't already. Definitely worth taking a peek at. All right, it is about time for our special guest. We really can't go on a break today because, as you've seen, we don't have our stream master, and so we're just going to go right in to our special guest, Dr. Aaron Bell. Aaron, thank you so much for being with us here this evening. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all. I mean, I've really enjoyed listening to the show the last half hour, so this has been lovely. It's my first time listening as well as being on the show, so I've been really thrilled with all of the fun astro bits until now.
Wonderful. Well, we hope you join us again sometime, whether you are come back as a special guest or just as one of our audience.
I would be honored either
Sweet.
way.
Thanks again for being here. And the first question we like to ask all of our special guests is, what's the one question you wish everybody would ask you, but nobody ever does?
Oh my. So I've thought about this a little bit. So there's a bit on another slide, but so the question that usually doesn't come up, let's say people ask me who I am and, how many brothers and sisters you have. And I have 10 brothers and sisters. So there's a follow-up question to that usually I do get. It's like, oh, is your mother Catholic? Or, something kind of very stereotypical. So people ask that kind of question that they think they know the answer to. But what people don't ask, and I won't put the answer necessarily on the show because I have asked my mother for permission. But what people don't ask is, why did your mother have so many children? Why, what? And not in like an accusational way, but like I wish people would get more at that and just flat out ask me. Then makes kind of silly, kind of cheeky sort of assumptions, oh, your parents must have really liked each other, or and that's like it's all in good fun usually, but especially with recent news, from DC and the Supreme Court, like that really I've encountered that, in the past week that that conversation goes in a weird direction where it could actually be a very human conversation about what pressures my mother was under, what pressures women face in terms of they need to have kids or they don't need to have kids, or why do you have so many kids when you do? And that, that's something I think about a lot. Is I kind of wish people would be a bit more perceptive, or I don't know what the word is, but that's my answer. I don't have the answer to the question necessarily, but that's the question that I would answer your question with.
That's fantastic, Aaron. And now we have to have you back on the show because I do want you to ask your mother's permission to answer that question for us. And I can't wait to hear it. So consider that an invitation to come back at some point, and with your mom's permission, of course, and giving us the answer to that question. That's really cool. And thank you for tying that into what happened at the Supreme Court that every woman in the country is thinking about in one way or another. And as you said, how are we to assume how they're thinking about it, right? I mean, I've certainly have talked to my friends about it. I know how they feel, but I don't know how all women feel. Nor do I know your mom's reasoning for having 10 kids. So the assumptions we make about people certainly are problematic at times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. That was a great introduction. And I'm curious about you. I mean, how did you get into astronomy? I know that you're also a machine learning software engineer. How did that all come about? And what's your experience been like in those fields?
Okay, I mean, I guess it's all open. If you have a specific question, because I can go off on all kinds of wild tangents. So
we've had a lot of people on the show who are astronomers who have done work in astronomy, and some of them have inspirational childhood experiences from a parent or a grandparent or a teacher that propels them towards studying astronomy from the time they're really little. Other times people have those experiences as adults. We've heard stories like that as well. And so I'm curious, out of those two extremes, where do you fall, or somewhere in the middle? What was the catalyst that propelled you toward your current situation?
Well, I mean, I'm at the same time glad you asked that, but I'm also like terrified because that's another question that I always get asked. Like, you must have some magical reason why you wanted to think about space. And well, what reason do you need? It's space. It's cool. There's always that answer, right? But yeah, so I didn't have like a catalytic moment. But speaking about my mother, there were definitely times when I would go and bring home some random book from the kindergarten library or something about science. It might have been like comets or something. And my mother never really pushed me to go for science or space, but I would bring home this weird book and she would sit there and go through it with me. She'd be like, okay, this week you brought home, I guess, comets. Next week, why don't you bring home something about asteroids or something else? And that kind of very, you know, I guess playful kind of attitude towards, you know, just grab the thing that you're curious about, kind of led me in that direction, I think. You know, if I think about it now, astronomy, I mean, why I went into astronomy specifically and not, you know, planetary science or geology, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, but there were moments in undergrad where I wasn't even set on astronomy until, I don't know, like my senior year, right? I actually went into biology first. And I thought, oh, you know, and this is still true. I was really excited about ecosystems and the kind of like, what's the word? Like, not just biology for biology's sake, but kind of these intersections between like studying ecosystems and how that connects to complexity, right? It's kind of like what's the word? Interfaces between biology and, you know, social issues. I was also really curious about neuroscience because I thought that's really, you know, this frontier that gets at how my own brain works, because I'm, you know, I guess the word to use these days is neurodivergent, and I'm kind of happy that word exists now because it's really convenient, and I can kind of identify as that without getting into many particulars. You know, I deal with ADHD really strongly, and that was kind of a motivator to kind of look at this frontier issue because it was relevant to me. I have disabled siblings who suffer from neurological disorders. So I was kind of all over the board, you know, and like, well, this is cool because it affects me, but this is also cool because it affects me. But then there's space, you know, it's like I'm a complete mess. Why I specifically, like the practical reason I got into astronomy towards the end was I had a professor that was teaching basic university physics, but he was an astronomer. And I remember him showing these just gorgeous pictures of the galaxy. And it wasn't just, you know, the Milky Way, it was like velocity plots, like this way of looking at the galaxy in terms of how stuff is moving in it. I just thought, oh my God, this is so cool, you know. And not only that, I could just go back to my dorm room to my gaming PC and be like, oh, look at me, I'm playing with astronomical data, you know. And that was just like so novel to me that kind of interfaced with my, you know, sort of hobbies and maybe my sort of not antisocial is like a loaded word. I don't think it's accurate here. That's the word that's coming to mind. But I wasn't necessarily shy, but you know, I wasn't also the most like social person. I'd been homeschooled for a number of years. That wasn't why I was social, but you know, and I had gone to university a bit early. There's a wonderful program in Kentucky called sorry, this is another one of my tangents. The Gatton Academy that kind of lets people from underprivileged sort of neighborhoods that don't have science classes or really good science classes kind of just get out of the system and go to college a bit early, you know. So I had done that, and I was very sort of nervous person, but I was on a college campus suddenly, and at the time, doing astronomy research in that way of being able to kind of go hang out with my professor, but then go back to my room and kind of like play with data and pretty pictures. That was this kind of great workaround where I didn't have to go to a lab and feel like nervous and interacting with people all the time, but I could have this good balance of it. I think that's the practical reason why I got involved in it, because I had the opportunity. But then space was cool, you know, and that helped me stay in it. And that led, you know, one thing led to another. And I was also, you know, doing Japanese as my foreign language requirement at the time. And that got me building up this curiosity about going to Japan at some point, but that's expensive. So the idea of doing grad school in Japan popped into my head. Oh, well, how can I make that happen? How can I maximize the chance of getting to, you know, go through this cool adventure overseas? And this is a lot of information. You can interrupt me at any point.
No, this is great. Yeah, give it going. Give it going.
But yeah, that led to me doing a PhD in Japan on a similar topic to what I was doing in undergrad. And this was, again, like kind of dust distribution in the Milky Way. This is like, you know, someone mentioned like complex molecules earlier, and it's funny because the definition of that just depends on who you ask, and it depends on their mood, because it's like, oh, so you mean something bigger than, helium? No, 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 no. I mean like organic stuff. Oh, so you mean like, and it just, but yeah. So I was looking at not interplanetary dust, not the stuff that you find floating out, in the solar system necessarily, but the stuff that's farther away than that, stuff that like supernovae spit out, or the stuff that, there's all this debate about how they're formed, but that's what I was doing. And that related, this professor in Japan, Takashi Onaka, was working on all sky satellite data. And that kind of meshed well with my undergraduate research project at the time. I thought, oh, this is great. This is the perfect opportunity. I want to go to Japan. I want to keep doing fun computational spacey things. So I reached out to him, and that's how I ended up there. I almost feel this identity crisis when people ask me like, oh, why did you come to Japan? Or why did you choose the science, astronomy? And it's like, I really need to come up with a better answer, even if it's fictional, so this is not this hot, thing that people want to hear necessarily. But yeah, it just kind of naturally happened, and I'm really quite happy with that.
That's
So
wonderful.
that's the academic part, if you have
I
other
think
questions.
that's a great answer. Yeah, as you were relating that, I remembered one of your quotations in the interview that you gave with Active Connector that I
Active
really, really
Connector, yeah.
loved, which was there's a lot more to the universe than astronomy.
Right.
And I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
And there is like there's all this like the intersectionality between disciplines that you talked about and social issues, and yeah, I think that was yeah, a wonderful quotation, and yeah, a great
Yeah, I
authentic
completely
explanation.
forgot I said that.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, I should write that down.
You really should. Yeah, they printed it in big bold italic letters, I think, in that write up, so they liked it too.
Oh, I hope somebody liked it.
I mean, I did.
Yeah.
So you're doing stuff with astrobiology now, or you just started something with astrobiology? I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, so there's another sort of backstory to everything I just told you. So I actually had the option to do astrobio like way back when I was, looking for grad schools, and that was this decision point for me. Was like, do I stay in the U.S. and do something that lets me right away jump at this interdisciplinary kind of thing, or do I kind of follow this sort of passion to force myself to get out of the U.S., right? To kind of redefine myself, and that kind of well, maybe we can talk more about that later, but that kind of gets the more personal reasons for leaving the country as well. But anyways, so I had always had this in the back of my mind that, yeah, astrobiology, is a thing I want to address, right? I want to go into astronomy, but then use that as this kind of avenue for getting at the probability for life existing in space in whatever form it might be. And so that curiosity had always been there. And as an undergrad, I had also done this summer school. It's a wonderful program. Again, it's called the Sao Paulo Advanced. I always get the acronym wrong. I'll have to look it up later. But it's a summer school series in Sao Paulo, and they do various themes. And in 2011, it was astrobiology. It was a summer school, and I was just a wimpy little undergrad. Surrounded by these really cool researchers. I didn't feel like I belonged there, but it was a lot of fun. So that kind of embedded this curiosity in my heart about this interdisciplinary, international way of doing research. But my PhD went a completely different direction. The advisor I mentioned, I love him. I hope he's, well, I don't know if I hope he's watching right now. Exactly. I want a chance to explain myself. Really wonderful person. He's a bit indirect. So I looked up work he had been doing, and I saw something related to chirality of amino acids. So if you're not familiar with chirality, don't worry. I'm also not a really chemist, so I'm not very well familiar, but it's basically like handedness of molecules, right? So you can have the same molecular structure, but the molecule can be like a mirror image of its other sort of sibling, its twin. They're not the same molecule, they have the same structure, but you can have these two different like hands, as you have, a left hand and a right hand. Well, many of us, not all of us, have two hands, I guess. Am I too ableist in saying that the audience might have two hands? Well, no offense meant by that. So imagine something that has, two hands. So you can have that situation, and the question is, like, life needs to have, we think, this kind of handedness. Like, you need to have a bunch of right-handed molecules to build this kind of polymer. So you have your DNA, you have your proteins. If you don't have that, then it's kind of hard to form complex molecules because they don't chain together very well. And I'm butchering that explanation, but so he had this paper about how you could get, one-handedness versus the other in space. And it had to do with supernovae. I thought, oh, that's cool. He's doing this work that my undergrad professor is kind of related to, and he's got this astrobio stuff. I'll get to do that eventually. Like, I'll go into his lab and I'll start working on that. And I kind of got there, and he's like, oh, actually, that's just a side project. I don't really, and this is after like I'd already joined the lab. So I thought, okay, well, fine. I will just work on other molecules in space, and eventually I'll kind of build up my own project on astrobio. And it just didn't happen that way, right? There's so many other, like, what's the word, hurdles, in my PhD that I ended up mainly just exploring the data. It was a new space satellite, the Akari Space Telescope, launched by JAXA. And most of my work was related to like exploring the data and seeing what you could do with it. And it didn't really go towards astrobiology. So that's how the curiosity was built. But then through my PhD, I worked on something different. And I kind of given up on working in astrobiology. At the end of my PhD, I got this chance to do this program, which I'm also at now. In 2018, I did the earlier iteration of it, and I was on the astrobiology team. And the reason I did that was actually I decided already to leave industry, or to go into industry, basically. I thought, oh, I can do this sort of like parachute. I can jump out of the academia plane and parachute down to Earth and kind of like, I don't know, wave at astrobiology on my way down. Just kind of like, oh, this is my chance to do it. And then I can be done with it, right? I can satisfy that sort of like bucket list kind of thing. And I did it, in 2018. And it was just really cool. I mean, so FDL, the Frontier Development Lab, is this 8-week program. And it just like pitches these domain experts and ML experts on these small teams. And they say, hey, here's this unsolvable thing. Go solve it in 8 weeks. Just see what people come up with, because you can't always do those sort of high risk, high reward programs in the sort of normal NASA funding scheme, right? You kind of want some not certainty, but reason to think you'll get some results out of something, right? It has to be well justified. But this program is kind of hybrid. It takes money from the partners we have, you can see on the right, and mixes that with some grant money from NASA, and we kind of go at these really crazy ideas. So that's what I did 4 years ago, and it just so happened that this year they were doing the program, and well, they do it every year, but they were doing astrobiology again. They didn't have it in the last 3 years. And I thought, okay, send off the application, see what happens. And sure enough, they were happy to have me back. I'm really honored to be here. And so that's what we're working on now. That's like my personal, story of how I got into it. However much detail you want me to go into or not go into about what we're actually doing, I will leave up to you.
Yeah, I would love to hear about it. And
okay.
I'll just advance the slides as you want me to, so you can just tell me.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that's fine. So the main people doing the work are the researchers. So myself, JJ Hastings, Yang Gong, and Timmy Gibbard. So we're the ones working we're kind of like the postdocs or the grad students actually in the lab, and then you have these faculty around us that are kind of just advising. They've been really helpful though. So that's the team, and you can go ahead and advance. And so, well, I kind of gave my own personal background already, so you can get this one. I've used too much time here, but yeah. And this as well. Feel free to look at this later. This is my list of things that I've been rejected from. Just try and turn that,
reject survey. I've never seen that before. That's fantastic.
Yeah, feel free to take a look at it later. So yeah, the idea is life as we don't know it right? We can go out to a planet, and you can go on to the next slide, I think. Right, so we don't have a good way to universally detect life, right? We don't really have, I guess the word would be agnostic, right? We can go out and look for stuff that we've seen on Earth, or we can think a bit deeper about, well, is there something universal about living or complex systems that we can start to sense? And that would be, the tricorder, but we don't have one yet. So I think if you go on, and I should say, like, these slides were composed by the whole team, so I don't want to take credit for everyone. The clear example would be if we went to a planet, we saw a bear, right? You'd be like, oh, that's a bear, done. We found it, we're good. But what if we found something different? And you can cycle through, what if it's something weird like this and it had different chemistry? Well, I mean, if it were walking around and saying hello like that, we'd probably agree it was alive. But what if it wasn't? What if it couldn't speak? And in practice, we got to dig a bit deeper and see maybe samples of molecules that maybe are dead or living, but they have different chemistry, or they don't react with each other the same way that we expect. And then we have to, you might have like a rover on Titan that's just like holding this pile of dirt in its hands, like, now do I declare this as life, or do I just throw it away and move on? And it's got to like be able to make that decision pretty quickly, because mission times are limited. So that's kind of the justification here. But just to flesh out the story a bit more, I think that like slides are kind of redundant, or maybe I got ahead of myself. My team is pretty good at clip art. I'm not.
It's very nice. Very nice.
So right. Then the idea is to get at this question: are we alone? And the more human motivation as well. I think the next slide kind of puts that in a really cute way. I mean, we're kind of lonely, right? We've been looking all this time, we haven't found anything. Come on, there's got to be something out there. And that's part of our justification for this project is like, yeah, I mean, there's very important sustainability issues that humanity has to deal with. But in terms of, issues that are like kind of universal in terms of curiosity, we kind of feel like life potentially existing in space is one, high up on that list. And that's kind of why this is one of the programs at FDL. And I think you can kind of just, right. I'm kind of already gone through some of this, but yeah, I mean, we want to know where to look and how to look for a variety of different chemistries that we may not have even imagined yet. And so the idea for this project is to kind of borrow the latest work from chemists about how do we describe the complexity of a molecule in a universal way. We can say how big it is. How do you look at the structure of it and say what's the probability that this molecule could form on itself? And there's some great work by the lab, Cronin et al. And Marshall et al. Recent papers. I don't know how much of a literature review I should do, but yeah. So we haven't done that chemistry part, but our idea is to kind of take this compute that's been given to us by Google Cloud and maybe take those tools by chemists that they can't accelerate so well themselves and combine that with some databases that are existing and say, okay, here, you have this idea about how to measure the complexity of a molecule. We're going to take that and run it on all of these molecules for you so that you can then just have this database of how complex all these organic molecules are. And maybe that can build into eventually some sort of way of looking at a sample on something like Titan and saying, well, this sample has this probability of being living or complex, and definition of life is another issue. And this sample is less, complex. And then you can start to at least build from the ground up this idea of, which samples or which areas on the surface of a moon or planet are more interesting, and kind of target those searches. So our hope is that eventually this helps advise sort of missions like Dragonfly. But we don't know yet. The first thing we want to do is build out this database that, even people other than astrobiologists can kind of use to do more complexity research in terms of even origin of life or other even biomedical applications. So I think I've talked a lot, so I'll leave it at that, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
And I've already asked a bunch of questions as well. Do either of the co-stars have any questions for Aaron?
Just processing. It was all really interesting. And so just like, I've never thought about any of this stuff before. are you like, I guess I have thought in passing, never as seriously, about like, does all life need to be water-based or even carbon-based? Is that still an assumption that's going into this kind of high risk, high reward work that you're doing? Do you expand out from that sort of framework, or?
That's an excellent question. I mean, our team is trying to get a bit away from that and not just assume it's water-based, but if you ask your friendly neighborhood astrobiologist, they'll probably tell you, well, water is a pretty good solvent.
Right.
Carbon is great for making complex molecules. So I mean, that bias is hard to get around, right?
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, we're trying to be open to various different kinds of chemistries.
I always thought that would be cool. Something just
Yeah.
totally different, but it
Right.
makes sense that if we have limited resources to look, let's start with what's probably our best guess,
Yeah,
right? So
that's the common benefit. But then you have some interesting places like Titan where you got lots of liquid methane potentially. Maybe that can act as the solvent. That's another idea.
You had mentioned chirality earlier. I remember, I can't remember who wrote the book, but one of the folks involved was SETI, and he was pointing out that we only have one example of life starting on Earth. And even if we just had two examples of life starting on Earth, that would be a huge piece of data that life could exist at least a second time on a good planet for life. Is that something that your team is thinking about in terms of chirality or different starting points?
I mean, so it's one of the potential applications of our work, right? So we're kind of wanting to gear this towards potential future missions, but at the same time, I mean, if you can kind of study this idea of molecular complexity in detail, maybe that can help to understand what other potential, let's say, pathways for evolution could have happened on Earth, right? It may not tell us where to look necessarily, but we can look at existing molecules and say, well, if this particular organism had gone this direction, there could have been different branches of existing life, but at the same time, it might be able to tell us under Earth conditions what other types of, like I want to say life, but it's like even that's getting controversial. Self-replicating molecules could have happened, and maybe they just weren't successful in taking over the planet. Maybe they did spring up once or twice, or who knows how many times, but they just didn't win out in the end, and that's entirely possible. So we're not getting that directly, but this kind of idea of getting at molecular complexity is very related to that topic.
Cool. Nora, do you have anything? No.
I think it's fascinating.
Oh, go ahead,
can I
Lauren.
ask another question?
Yeah.
So I'm realizing I was making the underlying assumption that the most complex molecules are involved in life. Is that a fair statement, or do we find more complex molecules in other processes too?
Well, that is an active debate. Like there are some abiotic, and again, like abiotic, what does that mean, right? On Earth, we have all kinds of, things that we call like non-living, but basically everything on Earth has been, contaminated, if I can use that word, by life, right? It's hard to find something that's abiotic. But so yes, like abiotic, non-living processes, however you define that, can produce really complicated like molecules. But I think the agreement is like, in terms of, like polymers, right? Like long chains of molecules that are really complex. Probably we see the most complicated ones in living organisms. And that's kind of like the base assumption that we're going at. If that's not true, then we have a problem, right? Because the whole idea here is like, the most complex stuff you're going to find is probably some self-replicating kind of structure. It may not be true, but that's kind of what we're rolling with.
Then the opposite is also interesting. If by making a more complex model, do you necessarily generate life? Right. That's the way to turn that around. Right. And so that's also really cool. Like once you reach a certain, to be complex, you must also be alive. Is an interesting thing to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's definitely interplay there that we haven't considered fully. And that's definitely an issue there.
Tell that to a
things
single
are related to me. So
right.
and I'm alive.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Tell that to a single cellular organism.
Right.
Well, we're just about out of time. In fact, we're already over time, but we kind of make the rules here, so we can end whenever we want. Aaron, earlier you had alluded to your own personal journey and how it brought you to Japan and now back. And so I'm just curious to hear a little bit about that, and maybe that's where we how we wrap things up tonight.
Yeah, so I mean, what I was getting at is that part of my motivation to leave the country, maybe this is a bit silly. I could have gone to like, San Francisco or New York, but I was just at the time identifying as gay, right? I was still struggling with like, I kind of think it's true. I kind of think it's, that's who I am, but I'm not ready to admit it even to myself. So it's like these weird layers, sort of, internal debate. And something in me was just like, I wasn't ready to accept it, but I knew that I might be ready to accept it if I got out of my environment, right? I didn't think I was ever going to cross that threshold in the US. I needed to go somewhere where nobody knew me, and I just felt kind of anonymous. And Japan was kind of that for me. There are plenty of other places I could have gone, but at that time I was like, oh, Japan is cool. There's anime and stuff, and based on that, well, I mean, I can go there and I'll be fine. That's kind of how it happened. I mean, that's the part that I don't usually tell people when they ask why I came to Japan, but it is a very conservative place, to be honest. But me living in rural Kentucky, I was like, well, where are the countries I can go where I don't think anyone's gonna like throw bricks at me if I seem like I might be gay, like Japan was on the top of the list there, There are other places I could have gone for sure, and I know that now, but that was, yeah, I mean, that was part of it. I just wanted to get out of the US and kind of reinvent myself and take it from there.
I mean, and if you don't mind me asking, what was your experience in Japan? Like in that context?
It's a mixed bag. It's really a mixed bag.
Yeah.
I mean, like I still, I don't, I am saying this as a white, basically, cisgendered man, but, I don't feel in danger, right? And that, maybe I would feel that way regardless, but I don't, in Kentucky, I would have felt, and things have gotten better, in the last 10 years, but I would never have felt like, even if I could accept it myself, like to come out in like rural Kentucky, I would be like, no, someone is going to like hit me, and in that sense, it's been a very safe place. I mean, I've come out to so many people by now, and I'm basically completely open in my workplace, in my laboratory, back in grad school. And, I never ran into any strong discrimination. I was quite, people are a bit curious and not, as understanding of sexuality and gender identity, but I never had, really strong friction. Now, I have to say this because like, that's not always the case, right? I have transgender friends who just run into so many bizarre questions and so many issues, especially with HR departments. So it's not universally the case that you'll be comfortable, right? But otherwise, like in my workplace, I've been pretty proactive about like, no, I mean, this is who I am, and I need you all to deal with that, or not. I mean, as the case may be, and kind of filtering that out on the front end, and that's gone pretty well for me. Not to say I haven't gotten really odd answers or like the occasional like this professor changes the subject whenever I bring up, like they'll bring up their wife or something. I'll bring up my partner of 10 years, and they'll be like, okay, well now let's talk about something else. Happens a lot. But as far as like, outright sort of, violence or, even verbal discrimination, I haven't honestly been really lucky living in Japan. I haven't felt that too much. You get some awkward situations, some like really arcane human resource policies or that kind of thing. But, yeah, that's all I can really say. There are a lot of people living in Japan that won't tell you that. They will tell you that, their personal experience has been much harder. And I've seen it, so I don't want to be like, oh, it's, all sunshine and kittens if you just go in Japan. That's not the case. Japan doesn't allow gay marriage still. I mean, there's a lot of issues. But yeah.
It's a whole country, just like
right.
the United States is. And as you pointed out, there are places like San Francisco that are a lot easier to be part of the LGBTQIA plus community than
absolutely
rural Wyoming is. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that with us. Really
my
appreciate
pleasure.
it. And yeah, it is Pride Month, so it's really fitting.
It's relevant, yes. It's
Yeah.
always relevant, but
Yeah. But as you probably know, all of our special guests, with the exception of just one or two this entire year, are all from the physics out list.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Oh, that makes sense. I was
yeah,
wondering how people found my dark astronomy history.
yeah, we discovered the physics and astronomy out list, I think, like back in December. And we were excited just to find it. I'll put our names on it, and then we were also thinking about, like, how are we going to find like special guests for the whole rest of the year and not have to like try to find somebody every other
Right.
week. And we thought, wouldn't it be cool just to have like the entire year be people who had their names on the out
Yeah.
list? And we had no idea what kind of reception we were going to get, but we just sent an email to the out list, and we had over 100 responses within like 2 days.
Wow, that's just a brilliant effort. I'm really so happy to hear that. Maybe I read this and I just forgot it, but I don't think I knew that.
Yeah.
And I'm just so happy to hear that you went with it.
Yeah, it was great. So yeah, we had like every spot filled this week, and like, or this year, and like into next year, like a huge wait list. And yeah, we were super psyched to have found that.
Yeah, that's really made my day. I'm quite happy you did that.
Oh, sweet. Well, yeah, it's our pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, any last words of wisdom or thoughts or anything else before we wrap things up, Aaron?
For me, oh no, I mean, wisdom, that's not.
Don't mean to put you on the spot. One of your pithy lines from the interview would do fine.
No, well, I mean, what I would do is just forward on to some advice I got in this program in FDL the other day, and that there's a lot of focus on you introduce yourself, or you do your small talk. That people talk about their sort of academic background and their kind of their work, and not a whole lot about who they really are, and that creates this sort of like bias to, oh, most of the people I'm hearing from have this like very kind of linear and logical kind of background, and they went to these nice schools, and that's fine if you've done that. You kind of earn the right to brag about it. But at the same time, don't forget that there's so many people who have gone through so many different pressures and hurdles to get to where they are. So I would say, yeah, maybe we can all inject a little bit more of that into our own self-introductions. Say something that's a bit gritty about your background, and just get it out there, and have us acknowledging that there's so many different ways to get to our dreams, and the idea of a dream is it's like it's self-defined, and you don't have to be like wanting to be a professor. You don't have to be wanting to be these sort of standard roles. Maybe your dream is just that every day you get to talk to and work with really cool people, and also don't be ashamed if you also want money as part of that. So yeah, money is great. That's my conclusion.
That's your pithy comment.
Yeah.
Money is great. We'll all remember that.
Well, yeah, well, that was my thought.
I'm just joking with you. No, Aaron, that was very well said. Thank you so much for that. I think if gritty introductions become the norm, we all put ourselves out there like that when we're introducing ourselves, I think there's a very bright future.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure having you this evening, Aaron. Thanks so much for being with us. We've got a thank you gift for you. We'll reach out to you and send that in your direction in the next day or two. So thank you again. Thanks to all the co-stars, as always, for being here. Wouldn't have a show without you. So thank you so much for your time and energy. And thanks to the folks behind the scenes that make this happen. A couple people are out today. So we had Emily Frank, our program director, helping out behind the scenes. Thank you, Frank. And to the Wyoming Stargazing Board of Directors who supports the Astro Show, thank you so much. And all of you at home. We really appreciate you watching the show. And we hope to hear from you next time. But until then, be well and don't forget to look up. We'll see you then. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Aaron.